Welcome to the Red Letter and the Tara Palmeri Show. As you all know, you can read all my exclusive reporting at tarapalmeri.com and watch the Tara Palmeri Show when I'm on Substack. I want to welcome Anand to the show. Anand, can you please say your last name for me? Because I'm going to I'm going to butcher it.
We don't need any butchering in
Yes.
this climate crisis that we're in. It's Anand Giridharadas.
Okay. Thank you for doing that for me. I did not want to insult you in my poor I guess I don't know. It's an early Monday, guys. I can't get it together. But we've got a lot going on. I'm already feeling adrenaline though, because it is 24 hours until the election. Some of you will listen to this on Monday night, Tuesday morning, and we're here to talk about all of what to expect on these special elections, which Democrats are hoping will give them a little bit of mojo after a pretty brutal general election just a year ago. And I'll be at Mamdani's election night party, expected to be a victory party. Zohran Mamdani is running for mayor.
I will see you there.
Oh, great. Okay, so we'll both be there. I'll be with the Associated Press, and you can watch live on my YouTube channel and at the Associated Press. And I think it's going to be an interesting night. I have a feeling it's going to be an early night for Zohran, or what do you think?
I think that the outcome will be known early, but I don't know that it'll be an early night, because I think it's going to be a night, if it goes as expected, where there's a tremendous amount of celebration and a tremendous amount of pent up feeling unleashed. Long before he was running, New York City, I think, was beginning to feel to so many people like a place where it was great to live as long as you were like a global superstar or a hedge fund manager or the descendant of European nobles, but not necessarily a city where it was great to be a regular person. And I think this campaign has just invigorated so many people who feel like they should be able to live in New York City and not be driven out or driven to desperation by the cost of living. And particularly, I think the idea, he centered affordability, but there's this phrase that he uses that I think is the most important phrase of the campaign, which is afford to dream, right? I mean, a city we can afford is probably the central slogan, and that's important, and it's where a lot of people are. But afford to dream, I think, is actually the profoundest phrase of this campaign, because being able to afford things is like the base layer, like
Right.
that's survival, and that's what people want. But what becomes possible when you can afford things? Once that gets put into a column of things you don't have to worry about existentially every day, what businesses do you want to start? What dreams do you want to chase? What things do you want to build? What people do you want to have over to your house because you're not stressed about bills? I think on the other side of this victory, if he is able to enact this agenda of affording, it's not just affording that's going to happen, but there's a lot of dreaming that is going to be uncorked in New York City. So I think you're going to see a lot of that emotion tomorrow night.
It's the Maslow's hierarchy. I mean, you can't get to self-fulfillment unless you can meet your most basic needs, right? Security, safety, affordability, food, sustenance. But yeah, I agree. Sometimes I think to myself, where are all the cool people in New York? I mean, they had to leave, a lot of them, a lot of the artists, a lot of the writers, a lot of the greats. They just can't get by unless mommy and daddy are paying for it, or they're working at a hedge fund. And even the West Village, I know there's it's the place where, I don't even know, New York Magazine wrote about all the crowd there, and it's just doesn't seem fun or cool. I mean, my mom used to live on Christopher Street. Very different times. But yeah,
I think there's a fundamental question of like, what are cities for, right? And
yeah.
it's not just in America, not just New York, not just in America. I think this is happening in many cities around the world, where there's a question: are cities springboards, or are they like luxury malls, right? Are cities
Yeah.
places where people who have nothing, are cities kind of resources where that people who have nothing can use to remake themselves, to acquire education, to form themselves in the dingy comedy clubs and in the, artist studios in
Mhm.
a dodgy part of town? Are cities places where there's no prerequisites? You don't have to know anybody, have any money, but you come and you're already born there and you use the resources of a city, the people who are around you,
Mhm.
um, to become something, to make yourself something. Or in the age in the kind of recent few decades, a lot of our cities have become places that are more like luxury malls where it is best to come to them after you have made money elsewhere to enjoy having that money,
Yeah.
right? And you land in any city in the world and you can tell which kind it is. And I think I don't know that there's no moment where like people choose this affirmatively, but New York, like many other cities, has drifted in this direction of the luxury mall instead of the springboard. And my biggest hope for the Mamdani era is that it puts New York City back on that path to being a springboard, a place where you don't have to have anything, to make yourself into something great.
But let's lay out some of the realities. President Trump is already talking about cutting funding to New York as retribution for a Mamdani win. They are certainly going to clash over immigration. I would expect they're going to clash over funding because he's got a big agenda. Making these free buses. I do think he's pretty close to free childcare. Is that what it's called? Right? I think he's
Yep.
close because De Blasio already had 3K, so like 2K. It's not that far away. He's sort of coming off the foundation that De Blasio built, and the state run grocery stores or the city run grocery stores. I mean, I think that could work. I don't know, but I think that with the busing, I mean, you need the budget, right, to be able to do that. Although apparently only half of people actually pay for busing right now. So
I
uh,
don't know. I think this city is able to find budget for all kinds of things,
right,
right? This city is able to find resources for all kinds of things that rich people need. When big companies need a tax break, when movies going to
right.
be made here, they want a tax break.
Elon
Uh,
Musk got some pretty big subsidies,
hmm
right?
When
From
when
Governor
when you want to
Cuomo.
build, giant apartment buildings, there's all kinds of tax abatements and
Right.
deferments. So the city seems to be actually able to come up with money for all kinds of things. It's able to come up with, I forget what percentage, you probably know better than me, what percentage of police officers, make huge overtime money, and overtime, almost being the sort of the point of the
Yeah.
NYPD. So
Hmm.
money's around. I think the question is like, what do
Yeah.
you spend it on? This is not Somalia where
Right.
it's like, it's like, how do we find $1 million?
Right.
This is a question of like, there's billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Right now it's going to like NYPD overtime. If people in this city would prefer it to fund buses instead of NYPD overtime, that is a totally reasonable democratic choice that I'm not going to stand in the way of their making.
Yeah. I do think, though, having covered City Hall for the New York Post for about a year, I was in room 9 between the Bloomberg administration, the end of Bloomberg, early de Blasio. It's really hard to go up against the real estate lobby in New York. And he is calling for a rent freeze on um, rent stabilized apartments. And I just think that he is going to be up for a fight. I wonder what he'll be able to get done. Clearly, he's going to have an antagonist in the biggest tabloid in town, the New York Post. But we'll see. Who knows? Again, I think a lot of the groundwork has already been laid for him through the de Blasio administration, and he seems to be trying. to make allies, but he said something on New Yorker radio, and he was like, why can't we dream that the city can be better? Why can't we? Why should we not be allowed to put forward these ideas? And maybe they'll come, maybe they won't. But why should we not have ambitious agendas? And it's kind of a fair point, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. When Trump proposes big and outlandish things, we center the big and outlandish proposals, not the resistance to them. When people on the left often propose much more humane things that would just like try to make people's lives better, we center the fights that they're going to be up against instead of first the thing they're trying to do. I have had the privilege in my job of traveling to so many different countries and reporting from so many different countries. I'm just here to tell you, if you haven't gone to the same places, like, there are things in other countries that we could just totally have. These countries are almost to a nation less wealthy than us, right? I think the median per capita income in France is like 40% less than ours, right? But there's just social housing it's not just for very, very poor people. Like, Paris has housing for all kinds of people who would find it hard in a fully marketized economy. So Paris has decided that it's a city that wants artists there in big numbers. Now you can behave the way we do in America, which is like ancient people praying for rain. Um, let's hope some artists kind of find a way to have some housing here, or as New York has done at certain moments in the past, you can say, let's create a policy that would allow artists to live here. So there is social housing, not just
Mm,
for poor people in Paris, which there is, but there's social housing specifically for artists who make some money and can pay some rent, but can't compete, can't bid, get in a bidding war with a hedge fund manager.
yeah,
Paris wants to have artists there, so they've made a social choice to do that. Um, you know, all these countries in Europe that have free healthcare, every
right.
single one of them is less wealthy than us. Every single one of them.
I lived in Belgium for 2 years because I have dual citizenship, and I had state healthcare, and I lived in that situation. The only thing is Belgium is a really small country compared to the US, and so is France. And so, it's a lot easier to create programs that ensure people when it's like when states have their own, healthcare, public healthcare. Um, it's harder, and it's not
Is it
always
harder, or is
efficient.
it just more threatening to very wealthy people?
Probably partially that, but I do think that it was like the taxes are way higher than they are here, but I do think that when you think about how much you pay for health insurance, it's probably all washes out and it's probably the same. When you think about the deductions from your paycheck that go towards health insurance, right? Like it's probably about the same as you would pay in taxes if you
Oh,
lived in
and and
Belgium,
and, and then
which
and then
is
here's another cost, right? Which is never factored into this thing. You're absolutely right. If you add that, but here's another cost, right? Go on the street in any place in America. Okay. I,
Mhm,
I have literally done this as an actual reporting experiment. And go
mhm,
ask people, do you have any like business ideas? This is a country of hustle, right? Like,
yeah,
you and I are both
yeah,
entrepreneurs in a media
yeah,
kind of environment. Like, I feel like this is a country where everybody's got like an envelope, back of the envelope
mhm,
idea, a back of the napkin idea. Okay. So I feel like this is a country where people have these things, maybe more than many places. And then you ask them, what is the number one reason you are not pursuing this idea? And almost to a person, it is they can't afford to get off their employer-based healthcare. It is
yeah,
not it is not just that they can't afford to lose their paycheck, because I think people could have sometimes enough savings that they could afford to lose their paycheck for a few months and try their idea. But it is the thought of losing their employer-based healthcare, their children going some months not being insured, someone gets cancer, they're going to die.
mhm.
Um, that is the reason. So now, what is the social cost of that? That goes well beyond premium. How many businesses are we not seeing founded in this country every year? How many people are not doing their dream job, not creating their idea, not writing that book, not making that movie, not starting that startup? How many more tech startups? How many more uh, plays? How many more works of literature, works of music, albums would we have
Mm.
if people were not tethered to employer-based healthcare. What is the cost of that? I would bet it's a lot less than whatever we're saving by depriving people of healthcare.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You know what I found really interesting though, when I was living in Europe, and I used to talk about this a lot, they don't have the same entrepreneurial um like attitude that we have. They like the safety nets of their jobs. A lot of them get into large corporations, they take jobs there and they stay there for the rest of their lives. They're kind of like our parents' generation, you know what I mean? And they're not that entrepreneurial. They don't really love the small business. It's harder for them to get capital. It is in Europe. And so there are there's some benefits to the system that we have right now. I think it's harder to get loans too. They don't have credit scores like we do, which is a good thing and a bad thing. There are two sides to that. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned. And I think what's so interesting is that socialism was such a dirty word for so long, right? Because of the Cold War. But, if you live in a European country, it's socialist country. And I think our generation is less afraid of the word socialism. And that's what we're seeing with Mamdani and the election. And I think, even Mikey Sherrill would never say this, but Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger, Zohran Mamdani, they're all running through the funnel of affordability, right? And Mikey Sherrill says, I'm gonna deal with energy prices, right? Electricity prices. Abigail Spanberger has her own messaging, and so I feel like they're trying to attack the affordability crisis the way that they would, but he is doing it in the most blaring way by being what he calls a democratic socialist. But yeah, I think we're just an entire country, a generation is not afraid of that word anymore and what it represents.
No, that's exactly right. And I think, you know, I've always felt that what part of what happened in the previous generation, you had, and I'm sympathetic to this, you had older folks, people who are now older, who lived through the Cold War
Yeah.
and were told that, Russia could bomb you at any moment. Maybe they had drills and they went, you know, underground into bunkers to do nuclear drills in the '60s and
Kids
'70s.
practice going underneath their desks at school waiting for
Yeah.
bombs to come out.
Yeah. As we all know, being under your desk protects you from nuclear radiation.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and if you live through that trauma, I totally understand if you have a traumatic kind of sub-rational attitude to kind of any politics of redistribution, because you're not acting from a thoughtful place necessarily. You're acting from a trauma place. You were told that there was this menacing Soviet Union system that was going to ruin your life. It was a lie. It was not going to ruin your life. It didn't ruin your life. You're fine. But I understand some people are just acting out of that old fear. I think a lot of those people are dying out and aging out. And a lot of people who are a generation or two younger than that just don't have that trauma and fear. Um, they understand that in any society, I mean, just to get over this bullshit, there are socialized and privatized elements in every society in the world. In North Korea, there's definitely a black market for some shit, right? There's no perfectly socialized society, and there's also no perfectly privatized society, as far as I know. So the question is, what do you socialize and what do you privatize, right? All these politicians who deplore socialism, why are they running to draw government salaries? Working for the government is socialism, right? Socialism is we all put money collectively into something that we own together, like the government. So Republicans who run for office to fight socialism, they are beneficiaries of socialism. If we had zero socialized elements in our society, this would just a private market free-for-all, an anarchy of just buying and selling. There would be no collective government paid for by taxpayers, which then paid them out of their paychecks. So government paychecks, senators and congressmen's paychecks are socialism. Roads are socialism. Air traffic controllers are socialism.
Social security is
Is
socialism.
food safety. The people who
Medicare,
inspect your meat,
Medicaid, SNAP.
inspect your medicine. If you really don't want to live with all those elements, that's fine. Now, a reasonable debate to have is like, what should be socialized and what should be privatized? That is a completely reasonable debate to have.
Mm,
But I think what a lot of people just miss in these discussions, including on the left, is like, it's not about 0 of one or 0 of the other. It's just about what is the healthy balance of these elements, right? How much should housing, which is an area of complexity, how much should housing be socialized versus privatized, right? There's some areas where we would all agree it should be just privatized. I don't want the government inventing my phone,
yeah.
right? I don't think there's a single person in America who thinks that should be in the socialized column. That's the
But yet they
privatized column.
can listen to our phone
Right.
calls.
Exactly. Right. But there's
Oh,
other
geez.
things where, like, I don't know. I mean, these days it's hard to think of something that is purely uncontroversial. But, I would say like roads, generally people agree should like
Although they're
belong
not very
to the
good at
public.
keeping them up. That's the problem. It's like when you rely on government and it's not great at its job, like doing the most basic things like
Well,
picking
I mean,
trash.
that's true, but it's also, the right has this incredible game where they starve the public by fighting for budget cuts and, tax cuts that force budget cuts. And then government becomes less good at functioning because it has less resources.
Right.
And then the right is able to point to that as evidence of the fact that government shouldn't be given more responsibility, but they're the ones who, cause that dynamic. That doesn't explain every government failure. But look, boring ass problems like, programs like Social Security keep millions of people from dying and out of poverty every
Mhm. Yeah.
year, right? And I,
Well, let's hope it doesn't run out.
when I wrote my book, Winners Take All, I would often talk about, this idea that whenever government solves a problem, like a real big problem, like Social Security solving the problem of old age and surviving and
Mhm.
having resources in old age, big kind of societal problem. Whenever government solves a problem like that, it goes into a basket of things no one is ever grateful for ever again.
Well, it's
Right?
expected. We pay a lot in taxes. Like,
Right.
we expect the government to work. When it doesn't work, it's like when people say to me, like, why don't you write positive news? I'm like, you only write about things that don't work. You don't write about when the plane lands. You write when it doesn't land.
Completely.
So,
But it's worth
you know?
remembering that when we're hearing stories about government not working, um, it is in the context of so much that is working that separates us. And again, having had the ability to travel to lots of other places, like I know what it's like to go to places where no contract could ever be enforced by a court of law. That's many, many, many countries in the world, right?
Mhm.
Including many, big, I mean, you go to take India, right? It's a
Yeah.
advanced economy in many ways, and it's had a lot of growth and it's got a lot of big companies. Like no one getting into a business contract in India would ever be able to totally reliably assume that should shit go down between these two companies over this contract, that an Indian court of law would be accessible to them, would be timely, and would rule in a fair-minded way. Imagine, imagine what that does to an entire society where no one, right? So the idea that the courts in this country will enforce your business contract is so taken. Yeah, we had this problem with the Roberts Court, this and that. But that's an example of something that no one has to think about anymore. Generally speaking, unless it's some big celebrated case that's a political issue, generally speaking, in the millions of contracts that are just flying all around this country, everybody signing those contracts can comfortably assume that they will be enforced properly by courts.
Yeah, eventually. But yes, eventually. Sure. Yeah. I do want to get into it. Um, President Obama, obviously seen as the standard bearer of the Democratic Party. And, he was seen as very useful campaigning this weekend for Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger. Obviously, New Jersey and Virginia are very different than New York, but he has not endorsed Mamdani yet. He did call him after his primary win. And, what do you make of this? It's a day to go. He still hasn't endorsed neither has Schumer, although Mamdani was protesting outside of Schumer's house, I believe, at one point over the war in Israel and in Gaza. And And I don't know, what do you think about this, the Obama snub?
I don't think it's a snub at all. I think it's actually the opposite. I think, Obama has not, I think, very much endorsed in city races.
Mm,
Um, and the New York Times story was clearly like from the Obama camp, partly, as far as I could read between those lines. There was another similar story in the New York Times some weeks or a couple months earlier where they talked about how Obama World has embraced Mamdani and helped him. And it talked about Patrick Gaspard and all these people, like, as well as the Pod Save America guys and whatever. I actually think uh, the Obama World, to the extent that's a kind of whole now world of people and people have gone into various parts of
mm.
life, has actually been one of the places to kind of embrace Mamdani early on, and it's actually much more shocking that Schumer has taken so long, or and not endorsed, or Jeffries took so long and then finally did. Um, you know, I think there's this fear, which I actually think Democrats are getting over with Mamdani, but there's this fear that of like contamination by association with a democratic socialist or whatever. And the right doesn't have this anxiety. Like the right, a Republican in upstate New York will just go endorse some like cowboy immigration hawk in Arizona who is much more racist and much more, like extreme and whatever, and putting guns in all their ads. And the upstate New York Republican like doesn't need to be that person, but also kind of doesn't feel afraid of being contaminated by association. So it's just like, yeah, I'm from my place, but I'm going to support this person.
Oh, see,
And
I think that,
Democrats,
like, Trump's not really involved in any of these races in Virginia or New Jersey, and I think that's for a reason. Like, he's doing tele fundraising, but he didn't go to Jersey. Like, he didn't go to.
well, he doesn't care about anybody but himself. But the point I'm making is
No, he
Democrats have
does. He
often.
does. He knows these reflect him. He would go. He would go if he thought it was helpful, but he knows it's not.
No, sorry, but the point I'm making is that Democrats often feel like if a more moderate person embraces a progressive or even democratic socialist with a lot of energy, that they're somehow saying that they too endorse. And it's not an endorsement of everything someone believes. And so I think there's a certain maturity in Obama sending these signals of support
Mm.
from Mamdani that are basically like, you're running in your local race, you have energy, that's admirable. Like, that is not an endorsement of everything you've ever said. Like, that's a mature attitude in politics. If you agree with everything anybody says and does, every single thing, you're in a cult. And so it's okay, I think, for whether it's a Schumer, whether it's a Jeffries, whether it's other Democratic leaders, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's the Clintons, not that anybody cares, to say, this is someone who is connecting with people and channeling and creating power and building power through organizing 90,000 volunteers. Um, and that's admirable. And someone who can make people feel things in the Democratic Party again. Wow. Right. I mean, this is a party that, it's like in the hospital where you keep hearing that heartbeat, everything's okay. Like, this is a
Yeah.
party where like you keep listening to that machine to make sure. And this guy has made people feel things. And God, like, you gotta have respect for that. And
Yeah, I
my
love it.
my sense is Obama actually has respect for it.
You know what, I was listening to an old interview of Mamdani this morning, and, he mentioned that he was actually in high school when he started organizing for Obama, and I was like, "Wow, he's really, really impressive, especially for his age." Like, you know what I mean? He's 34, and even the way he answers questions, like, I don't know if you ever listened to his interviews, but he's got the skill of the pivot unlike any other I've ever heard. But it's
Yeah.
not but it's pretty, like, he's thoughtful at the same time, and
He's
I've
thoughtful,
heard.
he's very smart. And also, like, I mean, he's 34. Like,
Yeah.
until pretty recently in human history, that was like closer to the age people died. We've had a great century where we started living like a lot longer because of penicillin and all these other things, right? 34, like, for the founders, what were the ages of the founders? What was Jefferson's age when he drafted? Like, I don't know. If you're old enough to fucking draft the
That's a
Declaration of
good question.
Independence, and he's either 27 or 30, something like that. If you're old enough to write a letter to England being like, fuck off, we're making our own country. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you're old enough to run a city.
33.
33.
33.
33. Right? Are you going to say,
Cool.
Thomas, we should have assigned that to an 80-year-old? Were there any 80-year-olds around back then? Right?
I
So,
know.
there's sort of this age inflation that happens. Like, just because modern medicine allows people to live longer, which is great, I don't think it means that we should think things that people were capable of in the 18th century at 33, we should now, it doesn't follow that because we have invented penicillin, what a 33-year-old could do in 1776, we now think they're incapable of doing in 2025. That's totally backwards. It's wonderful if we've extended life through medicine and surgery and ambulances and all these things. But it really does not follow to me that if you could draft a constitution in your 30s in the 1770s and 1780s, if you could write Federalist Papers, if you could create a constitutional convention, if you could fast forward some decades, be part of deciding the fate of slavery in this kind, like people were not living till 90 all the time back then, right? Which is
Yeah.
like the, age in Congress. Why do we believe that the extension of life through modern medicine means that things that 30-year-olds like always handled throughout history, they can't handle anymore? That just makes no sense to me. Was
Yeah.
was Jefferson too inexperienced to
Well, people kind
sever?
of extend their, like, Peter Pan phase as well, I think now. 'Cause, think about it, a lot of women would have already given birth by, like, 14, 15, 16. They started families earlier. They knew they were gonna die at, like, 60, so they had to really get on with life earlier. And so with that comes a certain level of maturity, right? People often
Yeah, I
even go
think
to
things people were coerced to do, they should have the choice not to do.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, but,
but
like,
Zoran is
also
not being coerced to run for mayor, and Maxwell Frost was not coerced to run for Congress, and AOC was not coerced to run for Congress. All I am saying is, like, it's actually very weird to think these ages are even young.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're
depends on the maturity of a person.
young for what? Like, I don't know. Like, I wrote my first book at I published it when I was 30. I wrote it between, when I was 26 to 30, let's say. Right?
Mhm.
Um, like that's it's a hard, demanding thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, I probably could have done it when I was 14, but I don't know that I would have needed to wait another decade or 2 decades to do it either. Like, I don't know. You can, in most professions, like, you can do pretty serious things by your late 20s and early 30s. I think in medicine, like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want a 14-year-old doing surgery on me, but are there some extraordinary surgeons who are 27, 28, 29, 30? Yeah, probably are. Are there some
Yeah.
incredible political talents, movement talents? Like, I think you are, there are some things where you want someone to have done something like 8,000 times before they're, but I actually don't think political leadership is one of those things. That's my personal opinion. I think, the mayor, you were talking about sitting in City Hall, like the New York City government is full of lots of people who
That
have
have
that
been there
kind
for
of
too long.
who have that kind of batting practice experience, right?
Yeah.
If you have an idea on homelessness policy, right? And you want to know, like, will that actually work? Will that backfire? Will that create unintended consequences? You got a lot of people who've been in the trenches working for you as mayor who can totally give you the answer to that question. I don't think you need
He
to be
just
the
has to
person.
staff up right and know people that know how to pull the levers of
Right.
power because power is policy. Like, that is just how it works. And being a great communicator is amazing. It's great for your party. It's great for your message. It's a great way to sell your policies. Make sure you get credit for them. Make sure that you get reelected. Make sure that you have, a mandate. But ultimately, there are a lot of blockages. Although it's a Democratic, council, I think he'll be okay. Except for dealing with the real estate lobby, I think will be tough. And I assume, and based on my reporting, that he'll probably hire a lot of de Blasio staffers who have already done this already. Um, So that'll be interesting. I do have some positive news to wrap this up with. I'm hearing from a lot of my Democratic sources that they are saying that the shutdown will probably end this week. So once they get through the elections, Hakeem will likely call people back on Thursday, and you know, we may be at the end of the road. Which
And how? Well, what's the
they just
what's
vote.
the
They
what's
vote
the
to
deal?
reopen. They vote to reopen, and that's probably what's going to happen.
With the
He's
healthcare
getting
thing saved or not saved?
I think ultimately the Republicans will work on something for the Obamacare subsidies because it will impact their voters, probably even more so than Democratic voters. Trump has already said he wants to do it. He just won't open the government. He won't negotiate on it until the government is open. Excuse me, and he's going to do it. He knows he has to. They have polling from back in July when they're doing their Build Back Better passage, or not Build Back Better. What am I saying? That's a big, beautiful bill. So many B's. That showed, this is Trump's pollster that showed that they were going to be hit in the midterms by I think it was as much as 4 points, down by 4 points. So they're fully aware that this is a liability for them and they're going to deal with it. And they just need to, they have to get through the elections, and we will see the government reopen. We're getting way too close to November. The air traffic controllers, huge problem. SNAP, obviously, even bigger than that. And listen, if it doesn't happen this week, it's happening soon, is the indications that I'm getting from my sources. So I think that's a good thing for everyone to end on. Sadly, we have to get through an election first, but so it goes, right? This is
Yeah.
politics.
Yeah.
But yeah. Any last words ahead of election night? What are you looking for? And
Um, I think what's going to happen probably is I think Zoran's going to win big, is my guess in New York,
yeah,
and I think what's going to happen is a lot of these fear mongering thing. 1 million people will leave New York City if he wins, et cetera. Suddenly, you're going to see this whole blob of fearful people, um, rich elites who who don't like the idea of a city that is more affordable to more people. Um, Suddenly realizing this is now the way of the world, and
mhm,
pretending they were for this all along, and trying to get in there and influence him, and that's going to be the new challenge, right? These people always do this. They're first against it, and then they're like, oh no, we were always for him. We just want to shape it. So I think that's going to be a very interesting thing. He's going to have to, first he was fending off critics. Now he's going to have to fend off the wrong kind of help. And while also building coalition. And I think he's
yeah,
been really, really, really dynamic about that. So we're going to see how he handles that.
yep. We will see. And also, how does he handle the New York Post?
I don't think he's worried about the New York Post. Rupert
No,
Murdoch is, an
yeah.
Australian immigrant who should have been more grateful for all that America gave him, but he's chosen to come to this country and use publications like the
I
Post
think
to
he needs it.
undermine this society. My parents are immigrants, and I always think
Yeah,
about the fact that my parents are so grateful, and my parents would never do anything to toxify and divide this country, in particular because they feel so grateful. And Rupert Murdoch is such a profoundly ungrateful immigrant who uses organs like the New York Post to just make this country worse. And I don't know. Most
but
immigrants
it's
I
the
know are not
important thing
like that.
about the thing about the Post is though it is how you channel to the unions. A lot of them, the police union, for example, which is something I actually found that Mamdani was smart to go on Fox and apologize to the cops. So my friend said that made him look like a squish. But I thought that was actually a smart move because I don't know if you remember from de Blasio's term in the beginning. I mean, he literally had such problems with the police where they were turning their backs to him when he showed up. And you need the police force when you're leading a city. So,
I don't
um,
know. I think the police force needs to, you know, check their behavior. I don't know that, it's on anybody else. Look, the criticism of police in general has been that they, kill people
Mhm.
for no reason. The seed of the Black Lives Matter movement that a lot of police hated
Mhm.
was people saying, you know what, killing unarmed people for existing is wrong. And a lot of police people did not like that message, thought that
Mhm.
was a dangerous message, thought that was offensive, and developed their own flag. I just believe in the normal American flag, but a lot of police people thought it was important to develop their own flag with a blue line. I grew
Mhm.
up just revering the regular American flag. Call me normie.
Yeah.
But a lot of the police wanted this kind of more fashy flag, um, fascist kind of adjacent flag to signal their hostility to that movement, rooted in the idea that unarmed people shouldn't be killed. So I'm less concerned with who the police turn their back on than whether the police are here for us. They exist at our pleasure. I don't live in the NYPD city. The NYPD has jobs in my city. We employ the NYPD, and
Mhm.
we are free as citizens who vote to shape a different direction, right? If we feel like the way they're doing their job makes us safer and gives us the kind of city we want, great. If we vote democratically to shift uh, philosophically in a different direction, we're not getting rid of police, but
Mhm.
we're saying, you know what? Police exist with a kind of impunity that doesn't make a lot of people feel safe, and we want them to shift direction. If they don't want to work for the police, they're welcome to, there's so many, well, I can't say there's so many other jobs in the age of AI, but there are
Did
other
you did
jobs.
you grow up near New York, or where did you grow up?
I grew up in Ohio and DC.
Okay, so I grew up very close to New York, and, like, my mom's from there. I was born in New York. I'm also the daughter of an immigrant, and it wasn't like it we've come a really long way in the city from what it was like when I was a kid. Like, I was genuinely afraid to go into the city, Midtown. It was, like, a dangerous place to live, a really dangerous place to live. You wouldn't even wanna live like, you wouldn't wanna live downtown. You wouldn't wanna live where we live. I mean, not necessarily where you live, but you know what I'm saying? Like, the city has become a much better city and place, and I don't know, I think that there is something to be thinking about in terms of security, and even though, um Mamdani didn't lean into that in this campaign, even though he was advised to, which I thought was interesting. He went with the affordability route, but I don't think you can take away from how necessary it is to have a relationship as the mayor with the
But I
police
think in,
force.
in what you just said, it was so interesting. The assumption behind what you just said is that
Yeah.
it is police and the work of police that
Well,
make a city safer. And I would
yeah.
argue, if you look at a lot of social science research, there is a lot of things that make cities safer. And police may not even be the most important one. And probably the most important one is the condition of most people's lives, right? Um, what do you think? What do you think the level of stealing is in Norway?
I've been to Norway, but I don't know. It's probably low. It's a pretty
Why?
homogeneous, like,
Why? Because their cops are very fierce.
it's a small country. It's really
It's
small.
not the size of Norway. That there's a lot of social science on that. I can tell you, it is not the size of Norway that makes stealing lower.
What is
And
it
it
then?
it is less desperation.
Mm. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would say that. It's the
You think
city's
you think
become
people you think people prefer selling drugs and making, I don't know, 15 grand a year from it to having a job
Mhm.
with benefits and whatever where they make 80 grand a year or
I would
100 grand a
agree.
year,
I think there are a lot
right?
of different things. I think there are a lot of
So when you talk
aspects, and
about
I
a
do think that
Mamdani agenda,
I think people also want their own neighborhoods to be policed.
sure, but I'm saying what the assumption that you were just making was that police are important because the city used to be unsafe and now it's more safe. And what I'm
Mhm.
suggesting to you is that based on reporting I've done around the world, not just in this city or just in this country, the things that make us safe are the conditions of other people around us, right?
Yeah.
It would be very hard for me to imagine you committing a whole bunch of crimes that I might be able to think of. And I think the reason you're not going to commit those crimes if I'm making an assumption, is not because you're afraid of the police. I think you have needs met in your life that make it much less likely that you would commit robbery, that you would attempt to sell and deal drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would bet my confidence that you are not going to commit a bunch of crimes has to do not with a sense that the police have cowed you. It has to do with the sense that you don't need to
Well, yeah,
do
and
that.
that's the other thing. Like petty crime in Europe is really high, actually. It's higher than in the US. People steal wallets, they steal bags, they
Hmm.
steal that kind of stuff from people all the time. I actually was like the victim of crimes when I lived in Europe, which I
But there's
haven't
crime. There's crime
had to.
everywhere, and by the
Yeah,
way, there's inequality everywhere. There's housing. Housing
right.
prices are rising everywhere. These issues are everywhere. Um,
I'm
but I think it's a mistake to think that the Mamdani, what you were setting up is people value safety, but
mhm,
Mamdani is pushing for a new thing with the cops. What I'm suggesting to you is if you read the social science on what leads to safety and what leads to danger, an agenda of making life less desperate for millions
mhm.
of people could result, would in my view be likely to result in much less crime.
Well, we
I
should hope.
like I most people who the idea you think about the least governed places in this planet, right? Think about true anarchies or places after
Mm,
civil war, whatever, right? Where almost everybody is kind of engaged in
mhm.
crime or illegal activity or whatever, right? They're doing that for the same reason you and I are doing our jobs, to like feed their families and take care. Like most people are not serial killers, right?
But then, like, how do you, make sense of the crime that is in Europe? Like, the type of crime?
It is less than in this country, and
I
every
don't not
indicator.
the petty crime, it's higher for sure.
Petty
And
crime, yes,
when I was
people are also struggling to live in every European country. Things are very expensive around the world.
mhm,
Real estate, in particular, has been commodified around the world. No one is saying otherwise. All I am suggesting to you is
mm,
police play a role in making society safer, but you can't police your way to a safe society if people around you are desperate, because
yeah,
people will take care of their kids.
yeah,
I will commit whatever crime I would need to put food on the table
mhm,
for my kids. There is
yeah,
no crime I wouldn't commit if that was the only way to put
yeah.
food on the table for my kids. So I have to assume that other people make that calculation too. The difference between you and I and people who might have to make that calculation is you and I don't have to make that
I don't know that
calculation.
they're always doing it to feed themselves,
I
but
didn't say
maybe that's
always.
for
I'm talking
yeah,
about an agenda of having people be able to afford life and be less desperate
mm,
is an agenda that would be likely to reduce crime. And there's a whole bunch of social science to prove it.
well, we shall see if the fixing the affordability crisis will result in less crime, and we'll see what Mamdani can do, what he's, like, capable of achieving as a mayor, and I mean, this will chart a new path forward for the Democratic Party, and, we'll see if they embrace him too. I wanna thank everybody for joining. I think this was really interesting, and I'll see you at the party tomorrow night.
Yeah, sounds great.
Uh, yeah, okay, well, I appreciate everyone, and sign up for both of our newsletters, and we will hopefully do this again soon. I think we can maybe in a few months look back on it and see what seems to have worked, what hasn't, what's on the place. So thank you so much, everybody. Okay,
Thank you.
cheers. Bye. That was another episode of the Tara Palmeri Show. If you want to support that type of investigative, independent journalism, please go to tarapalmeri.com and sign up for the Red Letter. It's a way to support independent investigative journalism, to find the stories that you won't hear or read elsewhere. It is amazing that there has been such little coverage of this story, and that is why I had to have Ken on my show to tell you all about it. But if you want to keep this kind of journalism alive, please go to my website and consider becoming a paid subscriber to the Red Letter. If you like this show, please rate it, subscribe, share it with all of your friends. I want to thank my producer, Eric Abinate. I want to thank my researcher, Abby Baker. She also handles my socials, and Adam Stewart, who does my graphics. I'll be back again this week.